At the end of the road, a truck approached, and in front of them were countless zombies. They're the same Madison and Kalitaka who went with Victor to find the reservoir. Victor dropped an electronic device, which attracted the zombies to the roadside. The truck crashes through the abandoned vehicles on the road. They reached a parking lot with a horde of zombies still following them closely. Victor looked around, and Madison didn't understand why they had come here. Finally, Victor pushed aside a car, revealing the entrance to an underground pipeline that led to the reservoir. On the other side, Lola and her group were delivering water to ordinary people every day. These people, initially grateful, had turned hostile and were pressuring Lola to hand over the dam, even resorting to violence. Do you remember Efren in the car? He is the true embodiment of a saint. They finally managed to escape the crowd and return to the dam. Efren was still blaming Daniel for using a gun. As a former hitman from before the apocalypse, Daniel understood the harsh realities of human nature. Just then, Daniel seemed to have noticed something. A figure appeared near the pipeline, and without hesitation, Daniel fired his gun. When he gets closer, it's Victor the liar.
Hijo de puta.
It's me. No, it's okay. Daniel, thank God you're alive. Thought you burned in the fire.
I'm better now. Ophelia?
She's alive, Daniel.
Daniel was relieved to hear that his daughter was still alive. Daniel believed everything Madison said. With Daniel's help, they made their way to the dam. They looked at the huge reservoir and wondered. Daniel and Lola seemed to be caught in an argument. Finally, Lola and Madison began to talk. Madison says we can trade you fuel weapons for fresh water. Efren, who was nearby, panicked. The last thing he wants to do is to use violence to survive. And he rushes to warn Lola. Lola spoke up. We don't have any extra water for you. Madison feels strange too. You have so much water. Lola remained firm, saying they had no surplus to offer. Madison said, I know you've just been attacked. It's only a matter of time before they come for your stuff. We can provide weapons and even men to protect you. However, the negotiation fell apart, and Kalitaka left angrily. That night, as they watched Victor looking relaxed, Kalitaka confronted him. He asked Victor if he found the situation amusing and reminded Victor that they could have bought water and left if it hadn't been for him. Kalitaka threatened to evict people from the farm if there was not enough water. Victor finally realized the seriousness of the situation. Madison found Lola again. Lola said that people were starting to have a problem with it. If I give water to outsiders again, they'll start a rebellion. Madison advised Lola, as a leader, to be a bit more ruthless. Victor also tried to find a solution from Efren's side. After just a few conversations, Victor is confused. He was the most naive person he'd ever met.
You think that people would be grateful that you bring them water?
They wouldn't bite if Daniel didn't shoot.
He's against Daniel's use of violence. Victor is speechless.
I had no right. The people are thirsty, scared. He's paranoid.
Why should he be paranoid?
He thinks the people are plotting a takeover. He tries to convince Lola. I keep her mind clear.
Dissatisfaction breeds dissent, and dissent leads to revolt. You not wanting Daniel to be right does not make him wrong.
There are those who want chaos, but violence begets violence.
What would you have Lola do?
Open the floodgates. Let the river flow to the people.
The water would evaporate. You'd be left with dust.
And then the rains will come again. God will choose.
With the water purchase negotiations going nowhere, Kalitaka had no choice but to leave first. He had to go and evict the people on the farm. Madison and Victor decided to stay behind and continue trying to find a solution. At this moment, Daniel found Victor and shared a cryptic slogan.
Okay, but I'm sure that serpent brain of yours is coiling around an idea.
I don't know what you're talking about, old man.
Whatever it is, if it benefits both of us, I'll look the other way. Bajo la reina de la...
He knew that Victor, a shrewd individual, would understand the message. Just as Madison was losing hope and preparing to leave, Victor suddenly grabbed her and led her back. The shockwave of the explosion destroys the fence, and Madison gives Victor a meaningful look before starting to kill the zombies. Lola also looked on in disbelief. Outside the walls, a voice could be heard.
¿Oyes? Abajo la reina del agua. ¿Oyes? Nos están probando para ver cómo vamos a reaccionar. Y el próximo ataque será peor.
Llévalos a mi oficina.
Strand, Madison.
¡Apúrense con la reja!
Finally, Lola agreed to trade supplies with Madison's group.
¿Cuántas armas y cuántas municiones necesitamos?
No, la violencia nos va a consumir. Por favor, no hagas este trato con el diablo. Libera el agua, regrésasela a la gente.
La gente tendrá el agua y la presa estará protegida. Es la mejor solución.
Madison reviewed the list and agreed, setting the trade for 5 days from now, and now they can also let them haul a load of water back to show their sincerity.
Thirsty?
Little did they know that a catastrophic disaster was looming over the farm. Tens of thousands of zombies were advancing toward the valley, while the people on the farm remained completely unaware. Madison and the leader Kalitaka had successfully located fresh water, but something significant was unfolding on the farm. Troy, who had been previously expelled from the farm, had secretly returned, telling Nick that he had a big surprise in store for the farm. Knowing that Troy was a complete lunatic, Nick and Jake went out the next day to check it out. They drove northward, and when they were about 2 kilometers away from the farm, Nick saw dust clouds rising in the valley. They quickly got out of the car to check out the scene and saw a scene that made their heads spin. Tens of thousands of zombies were moving in the direction of the farm. The farm had only one entrance and exit, and the consequences would be dire if these zombies reached it. Nick and Jack prepared to dash back to the farm and organize an evacuation. Just then, they heard the sound of artillery shells. Up close, it turns out Troy was using ammo to point the zombies in the right direction. Jake, consumed by anger, pointed his gun at Troy's head. But Troy, the madman that he was, didn't care. He knew his brother wouldn't pull the trigger. A stray bullet continued to guide the zombies. Inside the farm, people began to hear the commotion. Jake couldn't take it anymore. Despite Troy being his brother, he had repeatedly jeopardized the safety of the farm. Nick, by his side, kept urging Jake to show mercy, or he would regret it. Just as Jake was determined to kill Troy, Nick used the butt of his gun to save Troy, causing Jake to roll down the cliff. When Jake regained his senses, a zombie had already bitten into his arm. Their rescue had come too late. Jake's heart was filled with despair at this point. Even Troy was stunned. He had never intended to harm his brother. Nick finally thought of a solution. They had to amputate Jake's arm to prevent the virus from spreading. The ensuing screams echoed through the sky. Nick and the 3 of them were heading back to the farm at full speed, and Jake has passed out. The situation was now beyond their control. At the farm, the residents noticed the distant swirling yellow dust. It's too late to evacuate, so we have to hold on. Under Lee's leadership, the elderly, children, and women took refuge in the underground basement, while those capable of fighting armed themselves. Confronting the zombie horde head-on would result in the farm being razed to the ground. Lee came up with a plan. They would use vehicles to isolate the farm, forcing the zombies to move westward along the road. Armed individuals would hide behind the cars to deal with any zombies that strayed from the horde. As expected, the zombies arrived at the farm, and everyone stood ready in silence, not daring to make a sound. Predictably, the farm's main gate crumbled like rotten wood in front of the zombie onslaught. Alicia couldn't help but gasp as she watched the approaching horde of zombies. The zombies were indeed moving forward as everyone had suspected. However, when the zombies got closer, the cars began to shake violently, as if they might collapse at any moment. Soon, zombies started crawling out from underneath the cars. Dealing with the smaller group of zombies was still manageable for the survivors, but the commotion attracted even more of them. One of the cars started shaking violently, and it was shoved horizontally about a meter before crashing down. The zombies quickly poured into the farm. Alicia had transformed from the high school student she once was into a relentless zombie killer. Dispatching zombies was as easy as slicing through vegetables, and she had gradually developed a leader's aura. Alicia organized the survivors to retreat towards the storage room. However, Cooper was tackled by 3 or 4 zombies on the way. He had already sustained numerous bites, and when he tried to end his own life with a pistol, he realized he had run out of ammunition. Alicia could only endure the pain and end the lives of his teammates. The farm had completely fallen, and they quickly took refuge in the underground storage room. The survivors inside anxiously watched the constantly noisy door, but luckily, it was exceptionally sturdy. Nick, who was watching from the hilltop, was also brainstorming. Jake had bled to death due to his severed arm, and Troy had to painfully put a knife into his brother's head as he turned into a zombie. At Nick's urging, the two of them decided to figure out a way to rescue the people trapped in the basement. The only option was to detonate the fuel depot to attract the zombies and open the warehouse to rescue them. There's always something special about two crazy people together. Nick fires a stray bullet, and the zombies are instantly distracted. Troy quickly drove towards the fuel depot, plowing through the zombies that blocked their path, a sight that thrilled Troy. Due to obstructed visibility, their vehicle crashed into a truck, and the zombies soon closed in. They had no choice but to abandon the vehicle to avoid being overwhelmed. The helicopter was the closest thing to them. They could only escape to the inside of the helicopter. Nick was a drug addict before the end of the world, and now this feeling of oppression makes him feel excited. Inside the underground storage room, Alicia distributed supplies to comfort the people's emotions. However, a problem quickly arose. Some individuals had been bitten by zombies and concealed their wounds. Additionally, the ventilation ducts in the storage room were blocked, and if oxygen ran out, everyone would perish. Repairing it required over an hour, but the air inside the ducts was thin and posed a life-threatening risk. After calculating, Alicia determined that the underground storage room's oxygen would last for less than 2 hours. They fell silent. It was then that Alicia made a suggestion. Reducing the number of people inside might offer a slim chance of survival. Although it sounded cruel, the others realized it was their only option. The challenge was that no one would admit to being bitten. It was impossible to strip everyone in check. Alicia once again stepped forward, walking into the crowd.
I know you're scared. We're all scared. The vent is broken. And the more of us there are, the less time we have. So we're asking, for those of you who have been bitten, to come forward.
Everyone is afraid of death. Just as Lee prepared to take forceful action, the man who had come up with the plan earlier stopped him. He displayed his own bite wounds. Slowly, those who had been bitten came forward, driven by their love for their families. Then, the action began. Lee and Ophelia were tasked with clearing the ventilation duct, while Alicia stayed behind to handle the infected individuals. There were over a dozen people who had been bitten. Alicia told them that the painkillers she had could make them unconscious. Each person lowered their head, fully aware of what would happen after they lost consciousness. The first man was taken to a cubicle and sedated, and then Alicia took care of him with a dagger. It was the first time Alicia had done something so horrific, and the internal turmoil nearly broke her, but she couldn't stop once it had started. In no time, the room was filled with bodies. An hour had passed, and inside the ventilation ducts, Ophelia and Lee faced difficulties due to the lack of oxygen. They could only move slowly. All the survivors were now suffering from oxygen deprivation and falling to the ground. Death just a matter of time. When Alicia woke up again, she saw a figure in the corner of the room.
Hey.
After a violent fight, Alicia is once again in a coma. Unbeknownst to her, more people had turned into zombies and risen. Inside the duct, Ophelia had finally reached the end. It turned out a zombie was stuck in the fan. Lee supported Ophelia on his shoulder to deal with the zombie. Just as Ophelia grabbed the zombie, Lee passed out due to oxygen deprivation. Zombies were pulled down by Ophelia. With the fan spinning again, the ventilation ducts started working, with fresh air now flowing. Alicia woke up once more. However, all the previous survivors had turned into zombies. Alicia picks up an M416, finds a clip, but not many rounds. Fortunately, she had learned to shoot from Jake before. Facing the zombies before her, Alicia didn't want to wait for her demise. She opened the door and confronted them head-on. When her bullets ran out, she continued the fight with a knife. Just as Alicia is about to be captured by the zombies, shots are fired. Madison and Kalitaka had returned, igniting the fuel depot and saving Nick and Troy. After a brief respite, They prepared to exchange supplies with the reservoir as initially planned. When Alicia asked how the zombies had arrived, Nick chose to shield Troy and didn't reveal the truth. Ophelia learned that her father was still alive, and the upcoming trade would reunite them. Surprisingly, Alicia no longer believed there was a safe place in this world. She chose to leave, as Nick had once done, to wander around away from her mother.